So welcome everyone to our Draw the Line teach-in. This is a collaboration. This call is a collaboration between For Our Kids and 350.org. As you might know, 350.org is one of the many organizations that is coordinating the Draw the Line action nationally. For Our Kids is also on that committee, along with many others. And we wanted to do this call to share with folks in the For Our Kids Network more about Draw the Line, but also leave space for you to ask questions so you feel really clear about what this action is, how you can plug in. And we also wanted to give time to explore how families can participate in actions like this. Many of the bigger actions will be marches or rallies. So we wanted to, give folks ideas of what can it look like to bring your kids to something like that, encourage your friends who have kids to come out to something like that in a way that feels good for everybody. Okay, so I'll introduce myself. My name is Jinhua. I'm part of the network support team at For Our Kids. Um, and I am anticipating that Johanna will join. I,
I'm
I,
here, Gina.
you're here! Yay! Great.
Hi,
Yay.
everybody. Sorry, I'm running late. I was having some tech issues on my end, but I'm Johanna. My pronouns are they, them. I'm an organizer with 350 Canada, and yeah, really grateful to be here tonight for this conversation.
Awesome. Oh, thanks so much. Um, that's great. So I'll say a couple words about For Our Kids. For anyone who's new to us, we are a parent-led network of volunteers taking climate action for our kids, grandkids, and future generations. We're all about supporting parents where they're at and helping them take something on in their local community. We're always excited to support new volunteers. Please feel free to reach out to us. You can find us at fourkids.ca. So before we dive in, so sorry, I will give a land acknowledgement. So, we're joining virtually tonight from many different places. Um, but I want to specifically acknowledge the land that I'm joining you from. I'm calling from the unceded territories of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. And as you might know, the term unceded means that this land was never given up or surrendered, or there was never part of any treaty or arrangement to give up this land. So it is occupied land. And I've lived here for 19 years. I'm raising my child here, and I feel very, very grateful to the Three Nations for their ongoing stewardship of this beautiful place that's also known as Vancouver. For Our Kids likes to share a resource that can be useful for people wanting to know more about the land that they're on. We'll pop that in the chat. It's a resource called the Treaty Map, and it was made by the Yellowhead Institute. Really encourage everyone to check it out. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Johanna to take us through the Draw the Line teach-in, parts one, two, three, and then I will come back for part four, so we can explore what it might look like for families to get involved in this action. So over to you, Johanna.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jinwa, and thanks everybody for coming out and spending some of your afternoon slash evening here with me and with all of us. Yeah, as Jinwa said, I'm going to kind of lead us through the portion of the evening talking about Draw the Line, the mobilization, what's happening in September, talking a little bit about the political context that we're facing and kind of what Draw the Line is responding to, and then really offering folks some opportunities to plug in and take action before we talk more about what that looks like for families specifically. And I also have two kids. I have a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old, so I know all too well both the challenges and opportunities of doing this work as a parent. So who here has heard about Draw the Line so at all? If you've been involved in organizing a little bit, we've had a number of calls. Yeah, some people it looks like. have some context. So some of this might be familiar to you, but we're going to go through it anyway because it looks like it's maybe newer content for other people. Do you mind going to the next slide, Tom? Next. Awesome. So Draw the Line is a global mobilization being spearheaded by 350.org internationally, as well as other partner organizations. But here in Canada, we've got a really exciting coalition that has come together across sector, across movement, to really spearhead a mass mobilization, the likes of which we haven't seen in this country in some years, certainly since kind of before COVID hit. So the coalition nationally includes organizations like my own, 350.org, but also CANRAC, Migrant Rights Network, Worlds Beyond War, Seniors for Climate, For Our Kids, and others that you can see on this slide and beyond. Do you mind going to the next slide? Thanks. So we're really coming together around 5 key demands of our federal government. And I'm going to read them out here. They're also on the slide. The demands are to put people over corporate profit and fund our families and communities, refuse ongoing colonialism and uphold Indigenous sovereignty, stop blaming migrants and demand full immigration status for all now, end the war machine and stand for justice and peace, and end the era of fossil fuels and protect Mother Earth. So as you can see, that's a pretty broad set of demands, but part of what's feeling so exciting about the Draw the Line mobilization and the organizing, the calls like this, the conversations that people happening in communities across the country, is that we really are coming to learn about one another's issues, to build relationships across different organizations and different contexts and different movements and different geographies, and really start to learn more about these issues, even ones that we might be less familiar with. So for the folks who are coming in here from more of a climate organizing background, this is a great opportunity to learn how our issues around climate actually connect to a much wider agenda and how we can take action on all those fronts. So that's where we're going to start. For context, I think it is important to kind of get on the same page about what our government has been up to for the last couple months, and what our movements are drawing the line against. If you have questions as I go, please feel free to add them in the chat. I think we're probably going to keep folks muted for most of this call because it's a pretty sizable group. But I will try to keep my eye on the chat and respond to questions if they come up there. So as you can see from this slide, things were already pretty bad before our most recent federal election. From the climate crisis, which is worsening every year, to the ongoing genocide in Gaza, to Trump south of the border, flooding the zone with one thing after the next, just assaults after assaults upon our communities and our rights. Many people are feeling, overwhelmed, crunched by the affordability crisis, and struggling to know kind of where to turn or what to do next in the face of this pretty alarming context. And it was in this was the kind of background for our most recent federal election. Trump south of the border, the kind of anxiety and economic aggression that we are hearing from the US really made many people in Canada feel like Carney was going to be kind of a responsible leader who would help weather the chaos, help steer this country through the economic turmoil to come. And many people felt really relieved after he was elected. Polling shows that Mark Carney is still kind of riding this honeymoon period right now where lots of people feel relieved that he won, because they're relieved that Poilievre didn't, and are giving him a lot of goodwill in terms of the threats that we're getting from Trump. But unfortunately, Carney's first 100 days have actually raised a lot of red flags. So for folks who've been paying attention to the news cycle in the last couple of months, many of you, this will be familiar for folks. But many of Carney's first moves as prime minister actually represent a pretty grave threat to our communities, to our rights, to our climate. And that's what we're really here to talk about today. And that's what the September mobilization is really all about. So do you mind going to the next slide? Thanks, Jinwon. So has anybody, I'm sure many folks on the call have heard about Bill C-5. Does anyone want to take a stab in the chat at describing what this bill is all about? This was pushed through Parliament right before the summer break. I see some people maybe taking, I'm going to give you a minute. Somebody can try to describe what C5 is all about. I ran this teach-in in person in Toronto yesterday, so it's a little different. It's a little easier to have back and forth dialogue. Absolutely. So Kate from Toronto was also saying Bill C-5 is a way to build without environmental subscriptions. It's a way to build without environmental regulations. It's really a mechanism to fast track infrastructure projects that the government deems in the national interest. And we've been hearing those words, national interest, a lot in the last couple months. This is again Carney's kind of nod to protecting Canada from US aggression, but it's often being used to advance a pretty nefarious agenda here at home. And C5 similarly was sold as a way to kind of secure Canada's economic future, but it's really offering a massive gift to corporations because it lets Cabinet fast track major projects, national interest projects, with pretty ambiguous criteria and a real lack of oversight about how projects get designated that way. And then the Prime Minister and Cabinet can actually exempt those bills, those infrastructure projects, from key health, safety, and climate laws. So a lot of the regulations that we fought really hard to have in place are just getting bypassed as we like fast track projects right through. A lot of Indigenous leaders have spoken up against this bill and condemned it for violating sovereignty and really ignoring their right to free, prior, and informed consent because projects are getting pre-approved. They're kind of getting, rubber stamped from jump, which makes it really hard for any kind of consultation of Indigenous nations to feel in any way meaningful or that is an actual right to refuse these projects. This bill actually also got a lot of attention because of how quickly it went through Parliament. Was anyone following this in the spring? Yeah, I'm seeing some nods. So it really much more quickly, usually Ottawa moves at a pretty glacial pace. Those of us who have been used to doing advocacy for years are like well familiar by how slow things usually roll through Parliament. And this bill, on the other hand, was just pushed through really quickly without a lot of space for input, for debate, for the kind of consultation that really should be part of a process when something is so transformational. And even some Liberal MPs were really raising alarm about how quickly it was being pushed through. It also is looking increasingly likely that Bill C5 is going to greenlight dangerous pipeline projects. So Carney has kind of been touting himself as a climate-minded banker for many years. But now even he is saying that it's very likely that new oil pipelines are in the works and are going to be kind of pre-approved and fast-tracked through this C5 process, which really capitulates to corporate interests and abandons our emission reduction targets, which is just going to worsen the climate crisis for everybody. And that's especially alarming during a summer that I know for folks in Ontario and in Eastern Canada has been really exceptionally hot. And the wildfires, of course, have been pretty bad across the country. Okay, what about Bill C2? Is anyone this got a little bit less traction in the press? People not as familiar with it. Okay, so we're gonna talk about this one too because it's also yet another pretty dangerous move that Carney is making. This was actually the first bill that Carney's government introduced when they came into power. And we're gonna watch a quick video, if we can get the sound to work, from our friends at the Migrant Rights Network talking a bit more about what Bill C2 would do. Do you want to give this a try, Chinwan?
Yeah, I'll give it a try. One sec.
We're not getting sound, I don't think. Do you want to unmute and let's see if it can?
Since 2020 from claiming refugee status if they've been in Canada for over a year, even if their home countries become unsafe after they arrive. Refugees have a right to international protection under international law. Previously, migrants crossing from the US between official ports could apply for refugee status after 14 days. Bill C2 removes this completely, trapping vulnerable people under Trump's xenophobic policies. This bill gives the immigration minister the power to cancel visas and permanent residency applications without any due process or explanation, even those already submitted. Entire communities could lose their status overnight and face mass deportation. If passed, Bill C2 would give government agencies the ability of sharing migrant personal information freely. Send a message now to your member of parliament. Together, we can stop the Bill C2.
Yeah, so this was the first thing that Carney did after taking office. It's called the Strong Borders Act, and it's actually quite alarming. It gives the government massive powers to, as this individual said in the video, just cancel people's immigration status, including permanent residency, en masse without any recourse. And it also makes it exceptionally difficult for refugees at various stages of the process to access safety and status here in Canada, which is many legal experts are raising a lot of concern that this goes against kind of the norms of international law when it comes to refugee protection. So it could pave the way for, thousands of deportations a day and kind of a Trump-style deportation machine, the likes of which we're seeing sweep through the US to really alarming and nefarious effect. And something that's also worth keeping in mind around C2 is that it gives the government powers that then can be used by any future government, right? Once the government is able to, with the stroke of a pen, cancel the immigration status of whole communities, whole segments of people, that's a power that now every future government would also retain. So if we start to think about, bad enough under the current government, but just how bad that could get under future governments, depending on the direction of of whoever's in charge, right? It's also pretty alarming because of what Bill C2 does to everybody in this country. So it is especially, of course, terrible for migrants and refugees and immigrants who are seeking protection and safety here in Canada. But it represents a massive expansion of police powers and a violation of our rights to privacy because it gives law enforcement access to things like our mail, our data, border crossings, our browsing history without a warrant, all of which, we usually have some protection of that kind of personal information. And a lot of that is being scrapped in the service of national security. But it really does feel like a Trump-like move to increase surveillance and policing of people across the country, and then also potentially kick, again, thousands of migrants out of our communities, which is pretty scary. And this bill, thankfully, hasn't passed yet, unlike C5. So that means there's still an opportunity to stop it. And I'm just going to put a link in the chat that folks can go visit the Migrant Rights Network's digital action on the subject, where you can send an email to try to prevent C2 from being moved forward. Okay, next slide. I'm sorry, this is a lot. Another thing you may have heard about. Has anybody here, just raise your hand or say so in the chat, heard about Carney's pledged increase of military spending? Brian has. Awesome. Yeah, Janice, a couple folks. Okay. Yeah, so this was again just like really in the first couple of weeks of being in office that Carney immediately announced a $9 billion increase to military spending. It actually seems like it's going to be significantly more than that because he's talking about NATO's new target of 5% of the GDP on defense spending, which could hit a staggering $150 billion a year by 2035. So we are potentially looking at a 50% increase in military spending virtually overnight. And that's the biggest single item in the federal government's budget. So I find it interesting. If you think about it as 5% of the GDP, it doesn't seem so bad, but it's actually a huge percentage of the federal government's annual budget goes to the military already. And that's only going to get more and more, be more and more the case if these ballooning expenses go forward. So this is a massive ramp up in defense spending. It's kind of being talked about by some, pundits and politicians as a way to stand up to Trump. But it actually does the opposite. It's a huge capitulation to Trump's demands of Canada. It ties us closer to the US. It funnels public, Canadian tax dollars into American arms manufacturers more than anything else. And it ties up resources that we need for truly anything else, right? This is a drain on the public resources that we need for things like healthcare and housing and a social safety net and climate solutions. And much as we talk about in the climate movement that building a pipeline commits us to decades of extracting fossil fuels, investing tens of billions of dollars a year into massive military systems commits us to a future of war instead of a future of peace and stability and, thriving communities that are resourced and have what they need. One of the most alarming, just back for 1 second, Janelle, one of the most alarming examples of this is that Carney is now opening up the possibility for Canada to participate in the Golden Dome. Has anyone heard about the Golden Dome? Some people, yeah. So this is Trump's kind of like harebrained scheme to put missiles in space for the first time. It's probably unfeasible, certainly extremely expensive, will take many years, eat up, again, hundreds of billions of dollars, and truly just commits us to more war and violence instead of to a future of peace and diplomacy and resourcing the things we need. So I really feel like deep in my heart that more weapons really makes the world a less safe place. And it's pretty alarming to see Carney moving us in this direction. Okay, last thing on policy. How do we think the Carney government is planning on paying for this massive increase in military spending? Unfortunately, it is not by taxing the rich, because we're actually seeing Carney move in the opposite direction. He's canceled a proposed capital gains tax hike, which would have actually only impacted 40,000 of the richest Canadians, and had them pay slightly more on their capital gains. Um, he's also canceled the digital services tax on big tech. People may have heard that a couple weeks ago, which would have made American tech giants like Meta and Google, that we've been subsidizing through tax breaks for years, make them finally contribute something to kind of the Canadian government's coffers. Instead, the way he's paying for these massive increase in military spending is by slashing our public service. And we are looking down at potentially the worst gutting of our public service that we've seen in years, perhaps even decades. The CCPA is actually warning that this could lead to the deepest cuts in Canadian history, with massive job losses and service rollbacks. He's trying to slash $13 billion from public services just this year alone. And pharmacare, which Carney actually pledged to protect while he was campaigning for our votes in the spring, is now potentially going to fall victim to these cuts. The health minister is considering stopping any new funding deals with provinces, which means that many Canadians won't have access to coverage for things like insulin and contraceptives. And already, we need more. We need an expansion of pharmacare, not a retrenchment of it, because nearly a quarter of Canadians already can't afford medicines that they need. And 1 in 10 people with chronic health conditions have actually gone to ER because they aren't able to afford life-saving medications that help keep them well and safe. So, did anyone have ideas about where cuts like this might show up in your own life or community? I'd love to just put some in the chat. I know I can think of some. Yeah, schools, absolutely. Mhm. Yeah, so there's a couple folks raising healthcare, absolutely. Yeah, long-term care for sure. So this is what happens when our government decides to invest in corporate profits, fossil fuel expansion, and a war machine instead of resourcing our public sector, resourcing care work, right? From childcare to elder care to healthcare and pharmacare, all the things that we actually need to be safe and healthy and thrive and cared for in our communities. That's what our government should be resourcing and investing in. And that's really not the direction that we're seeing the Carney government take things. Yeah, refugee supports, absolutely. Okay, so that was a lot. I know I just talked at you for 20 minutes about some pretty bad news policy choices. But I would love if everybody could just maybe take a second to write a word in the chat that describes how you're feeling after that barrage of bad news from our government. And then we're going to talk more about what we can do about it, which is the more hopeful portion of the evening always. Discouraged, angry, sad. Yeah. Oh, Liz feels clear. Good. I'm glad. It's good to know the terrain, right? If we have to know what's going on so we can figure out how to fight it. Upset and frustrated. Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. Pissed that you voted Liberal. Yeah, they didn't campaign on doing this stuff, right, Kate? This isn't what we were sold. Yeah, I think a lot of people are in that same boat. And I think that, yeah, that frustration is really, really shared pretty widely. We heard a lot of better promises. So, do you mind going to the next slide, Jenna? We'll just talk more about what's next. So, a silver lining, I will say, of that pretty intense spring we saw, where it was just like every day, one thing after the next, assaults after assaults on our communities, on our planet, is that it has galvanized a lot of people like you, like us, into action. And in fact, we're seeing communities across the country coming together, hosting teach-ins in community centers and libraries, talking to their friends, sharing, news stories and social media graphics, trying to like have those hard conversations to get everybody on the same page and really ensure that we are coming together in September after Parliament resumes to draw a clear line for people, for peace, and for the planet. Do you mind going to the next slide? Awesome. We really believe that we have to come together now in this moment more than ever across movements, across the country, and really force Carney and the federal government to contend with our power, to answer to our demands, and to pick a side, right? This is the image here on the slide is from an action that Common Horizon and some other partners did in Ottawa a couple months ago. And really, I think illustrates the moment we're in right now. We really have to force Carney to feel like he has to actually pick a side, right? Will he choose pipelines and inequality and exploitation, or will he choose to act on the climate crisis and make our economy more equal and just and invest in peace and care instead of war and violence? And that's a choice that we're really trying to force this fall with Draw the Line and really make sure that Carney feels like he has to pick a side. He can't do both. And hopefully picks the side of justice and a future that works for us and for our kids. Do you mind just trying to play this video, Janelle? We'll see if it works. This is from my call last week.
To draw this line. On one side, the billionaires. On the other, the rest of us. On one side, the deportation judges. On the other, the rest of us. On one side, the war profiteers and the climate destroyers. On the other, the rest of us. On one side, distraction and division. On the other, unity, power, and collectivity. Solidarity now, solidarity forever. We must win united.
Awesome. So that was Syed Hassan from Margaret Rights Network speaking on an action call that we hosted last week, where we had a panel of organizers and stakeholders from across different sectors and issue areas talking about how important it is to unite our movements in this moment and really present a powerful no to this agenda that we saw roll out in the first couple of weeks and months of Kearney's time in office. So that's what Draw the Line is all about. Do you mind going to the next slide? Awesome. So I talked about this off the jump, but now that we know the context that we're facing, I hope these demands might have a little bit more resonance because these really are, this is our attempt as a movement, as people who, care about the future of this country, who are trying to fight for a planet that is safe enough for our kids to grow old on, really coming together to push back on some of the policy moves that Kearney has been making and ensure that we are able to, fight for a more just world. So these demands are really designed to speak exactly to this political context that we are in. Next slide, awesome. So right now we're really in the thick of it. September 20th is coming up soon enough, just a couple weeks. And so that means that communities across the country are having conversations just like this one. Yesterday, my colleague Amara and I hosted a teach-in in Toronto, and we were gathered with maybe 40 or 50 of our neighbors and had a really powerful conversation about the state of play, what's going on with our political leaders right now, and truly plugging into action. What can we do about it? Already, I know that across the country, there are planning committees forming in communities from big cities to, really small towns, where people are getting together and starting to get organized, to talk across issues, to get ready, to fight back, and are planning actions in at least 25 communities already. We've got flagship actions happening in Toronto, Vancouver, Edmonton, Ottawa, and Montreal for folks who are in those cities. And again, action design really varies. So some of these are going to be massive marches with tens of thousands of people on the streets. I know that's what we're expecting in Toronto. In other places, it might be a smaller community gathering. But either way, what these actions are all about is drawing the line and really fighting for the demands that were presented on the slide previous, and fighting for a future that is livable and just. So with that, people might be curious how you can plug in, and we're going to talk more about other actions folks can take in a beat, but I'd encourage people to first step, go to the website that is in the chat right now. And your first step is to put in your postal code or your location, and it'll try to match you with an action happening near you. So the first step is to RSVP to that action, and that way people will be able to update you about details. You'll be able to save that time in your calendar, figure out what location it's in. And if folks could just put a little emoji in the chat once you've done that, that would be awesome before we move on. And if anybody does not see an action near you, message me that in the chat as well. And we'll talk about what your options are, because we haven't yet covered every single community across the country, unfortunately. Soon. going to give people a minute to do that. Is everyone finding their action on this map okay? Some nods and some thumbs up, so just take a beat. Awesome. Did anyone notice that there was not an action near you? Yes, a couple people. Peggy, do you mind just sharing where you're at in the chat? Oh, you're muted. I'm not sure if you're speaking. Okay. I know there is an action in Edmonton, so that's if it's not able to match you with that on the map, we can try to follow up. But there's definitely a pretty big action being planned in Edmonton right now. That's great. Yes, you will be up soon, Brian. I've heard this. I've seen Calgary on our spreadsheets. That's great. There's that scan. Awesome. Okay. So if folks are finding that if you live in a smaller community and there isn't yet an action on the map, you can scroll to the bottom of the same website and click organize an action, and it'll send you to a form where you can start to put in some event details. And we are connecting hosts with all kinds of supports like a toolkit and trainings and funding and all kinds of things to make it as easy as possible. But I think for most folks here, probably what will make more sense is to plug into the organizing that is already happening. It's really exciting. It is really about more than just one day of action. It's about kind of building power as a cross-movement coalition, coming together. And yeah, that doesn't end at September 20th. We're going to take to the streets in a really powerful show of force across the country on September 20th. But this is about building solidarity that will last for years to come. So we're feeling really excited about it on the 350 team. I'm feeling really excited about it from the Toronto side, and just, being part of these conversations happening locally is pretty exciting. But I also know that, yeah, as a parent myself, it can be tricky and challenging, and also exciting to do this as with the family and with kids. So I'm excited for to move into some brainstorming with Jinwa about what that can look like. But before we do that, I just want to see if there are any questions that people have. Do you want to go to the next slide? Questions either about Draw the Line, the mobilization, or if folks had questions about some of the political context that I was sharing that you weren't able to get into the chat in time. I know that was quick moving, but I'd be happy to, yeah, happy to field if anyone has any points of unclarity that you want.
I'll jump in and say we're way ahead of schedule. So if anyone prefers to come off mute and ask a question that way, I know that can be easier. Please feel free to do so.
Love being ahead of schedule. It's not usually how things roll. Cool. I'll also put my email in the chat. So if questions come up later on, you are welcome to reach out anytime. Yeah, we're gonna talk more about some concrete things folks can do, but I will say that it's been extremely exciting to see so much organizing happen across the country. And if you're feeling alarmed and angry and outraged by what I shared in terms of what's happening federally, I hope also that you can feel energized and inspired to take action alongside comrades across the country, because truly this has been some of the most energized moment that I've experienced in a long time as an organizer. Yeah, Becky.
Hi, can you hear me, see me? So I just followed what you had us do, and it also gave us a chance to share. So I shared it on Facebook. So that was easy. That was great. And I'm on Scan Edmonton, so I actually thought I was getting all the info, but now I really will. I mean, I probably already was, but anyway, and that was a great way to share. Hopefully on that share, it also helps people sign up for that action. It's not clear.
Awesome. Totally. That's such a good way to, yeah, build awareness. On the website, if you hit that share button, or there's even some kind of shareable graphics at the bottom if you want to do a post on Instagram or Blue Sky or whatever platform you use. Even, texting friends, if there's other people in your life who are concerned about something like the, attacks on pharmacare or the C5 and new pipeline development down the road. Sending a message, just letting folks know there's something they can do, I think is such a powerful kind of outreach to offer, because it can feel so disheartening. And yeah, we don't want people to be stuck in hopelessness and fear. We want to move into action. Yeah, Brian.
I think I heard Jerry say that they were attaching the petition, the Stay in Canada petition, to their event. Did I hear that correctly?
I see that in the chat.
Okay. I'd be interested to know more about that. It's not among the 5 demands, but I think it's probably a good idea.
I have the petition, and I know many other people do, and so we're going to try and have as many people as we can in Edmonton there to sign. And I've let Thomas Lukaszik's group know that September 20th is going to be a good opportunity to have people come out and sign that and bring people out.
Got it. So you're kind of canvassing at the action itself.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's certainly not one of the 5 national demands, but we know that there's all kinds of ways that these issues are playing out at a local level, and that there are lots of, organizations in Toronto or in Alberta that might be, canvassing and talking about more local manifestations of what's going on. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, next. Yeah, hi. I'm just seeing your comment in the chat, Peggy, about global warming. It is serious. It is absolutely serious, and it's alarming. It's something that we're certainly experiencing firsthand this summer. Is just how hot it is, and it's something that motivates me in my organizing to do this work with 350 and to take part in things like Draw the Line. We really are not trying to downplay or underemphasize climate. We're trying to draw some connections so that we can be fighting at a broader scale, not just on emissions reduction, although that's part of it, but also on the wider changes that we need to see structurally to our economy, to the direction our government is going, that will really be helping us be more climate safe and climate proof into the future. So I think that Carney jumping so quickly onto C5 is making us all deeply alarmed that pipelines are on their way, and that's exactly the kind of thing that will increase our emissions and increase this kind of warning. And so that's part of why we're trying to come together in a powerful cross movement way, is to really push back on that direction. And I hear that it looks like you're in Whitehorse. I don't think there's an action on the map in Whitehorse yet, Peggy. So you'd be welcome to get involved in organizing one if you're interested. Okay. Brian.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there is an action in Whitehorse.
Oh, great. Okay.
And
Love it.
that information will be coming, but anybody who's interested is welcome to email me.
Perfect.
But also I want to ask about Sacred Earth Solar.
Mhm.
What role is Sacred Earth Solar playing in the collaboration here? I know they're a very, very active group led by a very dynamic person, but I'm just
Yeah.
wondering, where is the Indigenous connection?
Yeah.
How's that working?
Yeah, so Sacred Earth is one of our partners nationally that's kind of at the table, helping craft these demands and helping steer the direction of the kind of messaging and framing for the action. 350 and Sacred Earth are actually about to launch a petition early next week as part of a longer arc around a people's power grid, which is also nested within our demands for Draw the Line. So it's certainly an ongoing collaboration, and they are very much at the table. And yeah, and I know that at lots of local levels, there are many local Indigenous organizations that are plugging into local Draw the Line organizing as well. So I don't know, Brian, if you've got those connections already brewing in Calgary. I imagine you do. And if not, if any local organizing group emails another email address that I'll put in the chat, drawthelinecanada@gmail.com. We are more than happy to help try to kind of connect and matchmake groups in given places with people who organize on other issues in the same place to try to help foster those collaborations and those local teams. Yes, Jerry.
I guess the question that I have is, I mean, I'm signing petitions regularly. I'm actually quite resentful about the fact that I'm collecting signatures in Alberta for something that is just, absolutely ridiculous. But it needs to be done. But I've heard recently that petitions are not that effective, certainly not these ones that you get, online. How effective are they? I mean, I also write letters, but I've been writing letters to people in the, government of Alberta for a long time, and they just don't even listen to me at all. So, how effective are they?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. It really depends on context. I often use petitions. Sometimes I do door knocking to gather petition signatures, and it's often, it's twofold, right? It's partially about being able to deliver a long list of names to our representatives, and it's also partially about getting contact information for people so that we can escalate them to do the next thing. So I think a petition is only as effective as whatever the next step is. Which is to say, it could be not effective at all, or it could be the beginning of something really powerful and like growing a powerful campaign if you're able to build that kind of mass support and then, reach out to all those people who signed your petition and invite them to come to an event or invite them to, yeah, send an email, place a phone call, do the next thing. Then it can be a really powerful tool for kind of growing our movements because it's an easy, low bar thing that people can do. It gets them in the door, and then you can kind of move on from there. And sometimes on the political leader influencing front, I think it really is context dependent. I think there's a place for them. Sometimes it is exactly what a politician needs to see to feel pushed in one direction or another. And sometimes, as you say, it's make work and it doesn't actually.
So one should look at it as possibly community building then.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a big
Okay.
part of organizing. It can be a great first step, but hopefully it doesn't stop there.
Okay.
Anyways.
Okay.
All right, I'm just looking at the clock now, and Jinwa, I'm wondering if it makes sense to move on to our next section, which is all about what we as parents and grandparents and aunties and caregivers of young people can do to get involved and draw the line. I'll pass it back.
Thanks so
Yeah,
much, Anna. Oh,
Can I
sorry.
give, can I give you the White Horse address?
Yeah, why don't you put it in the chat, Brian? It's great.
It is in the chat.
Perfect. Thanks so much. All right. So, hopefully now, we all have a more clear shared understanding about what Draw the Line is all about, what the focus is, and ways to get involved. And I'm going to chat a little bit about how families with younger kids can participate in these kinds of in-person actions in a way that feels good. And the way we're going to do it is I had so much fun going through a whole archive of photos from For Kids Team's actions because I wanted to find lots of examples to really bring to life what this can look like. And that was how I came up with the slides that we'll go through. And after that, we'll open it up to the knowledge in the room because probably I haven't thought of everything and would love to hear from others if there's additional ideas. So that's going to be the remaining portion of the event. And then at the very end, we'll just recap the calls to action. But that's what you can expect. Okay, here's some ideas. So let's say this could look a couple ways. Let's say you are already part of organizing a local Draw the Line action and you want to make it more friendly for families. Could you create a kids zone? this could look like a table. You can see that picture on the right. It could look more like an area. The one on the left is, they've got sidewalk chalk, or if the place this is happening in has grass, it could look like blankets on the grass, some sort of a space that feels good for kids to be in, where they can play. Maybe you have bubbles or sidewalk chalk, art. Snacks are always really helpful. Um, Face paint is usually a big hit. Play-Doh at a recent tabling event, the For Kids team in Vancouver had slime, which is is a favorite amongst kids right now, I think. So could you create a kids zone? The other idea, like if you're not already involved in organizing the action, but this is something you'd be interested in doing, you could reach out to this email address. So write to drawtheline@gmail.com and ask them to connect you to the organizers of the Draw the Line action where you live. They'll put you in touch, and then you can say, hey, introduce yourself. I'm interested in creating a kids zone or a kids table. Could this work with what you're planning? And then you can work together. So this is one idea. Another idea is to host an art build before the event. This can be a lot of fun, and it can operate at different scales. It could mean, inviting a couple other families over to your living room, and you've got art supplies, you've got cardboard, paper, markers, paints, and you're going to make some signs. If you wanted to do it at a slightly bigger scale, you could book a room at the local library, book at a room at a community center. That's something For Kids teams have done before. And again, definitely recommend having food there, drinks, and just making it a fun, comfortable place for kids to be. And then they can look forward to bringing what they make to the event. You could also make a banner. So that's maybe a little more involved, but it can really be visually very effective. The photos here are all from local For Kids teams. You can see the one in Toronto. The kids have put paint on their hands and put their handprints on it. The one on the right, they had older kids and they used fabric to make the letters and sew them on. We do have a whole resource on banner making on our website that we will put in the chat, for kids.ca/banner making, and I'll also send it in the follow-up email. And then, of course, I mean, you bring what you made and you coordinate to show up together and join the action that day, whether it is a march or a rally, it will be some sort of a gathering. And so you come together and you bring what you made. These photos here are from the Burnaby team, and it was so cool what they did. It was for a local annual parade that happens, and they decided to make props and costumes and art with the theme of the future they want to see. So you can see they've made these windmills. There is a kid wearing water with salmon swimming up it. There's a giant flower someone else is wearing. You can really make it a lot of fun. I think that's a big part of it, right? Is to successfully bring kids to these kinds of actions. Like how do you make it fun for them? If you can't attend the local action on that day, but you still want to participate and be part of Draw the Line, you could host a letter writing party. So it could be letters, it could be postcards. This is an action lots of For Kids teams have done. This one here was in somebody's home, and they just first they had a conversation about what was the issue, coming up with ideas for what they could write or draw. And then all the supplies were ready, the paper and the markers, and They wrote their letters and then they mailed them. And you can send mail to the House of Commons free of charge. So we've put the address there. It's easy to find online as well, just your MP's name and the House of Commons address. We also had a parent in the For Our Kids network has made these amazing postcards that she and her son made out of Lego about the clean energy transition. They're really cool, and we're in the process of making them accessible on the website. So we know, the supplies, there is a cost associated with them. If you wanted to book a room, of course, there's a cost. So For Kids wants to offer funding to support people to organize these family-friendly actions and to help make Draw the Line a more kid-friendly space. So we can help cover the cost of things like art supplies, snacks, printing, sidewalk chalk, bubbles, that kind of thing. So we do have a funding request application. So we'll share that in the chat and also in the follow-up email. So we ask that you fill out the application, give us a sense for what you're planning, and then we will get back to you about next steps. Okay, I'm gonna open it up to all of you. I know some folks here are organizers with For Kids. Curious to know like what has worked for you, any tips or people who've, maybe you've gone by an action with your kids and you've seen something that's been really helpful. Liz.
Those are great ideas. One thing that I find is because it's so loud sometimes when there's so many people, and if the kids can participate in the loudness, it can be fun. So all of the noisemakers that you have, like the drums, like you don't want those inside anymore. But like I had my kid with a plastic drum in his stroller and like just beating on it, and like he felt a part of stuff, even though the noise, like he was in his own noise piece. So, yeah, I'm never getting rid of my noisemakers because it kind of brings out the funness for adults too. Another, so like shakers, and you can make them out of cans and just put stuff in them too and wrap them. I've heard people do that. And paper towels holders with like strips of colorful fabric to be like streamers. So
Oh,
like if not paper streamers, but fabric, and you wave them, and it's so much fun. Adults and kids, honestly, who doesn't need more play, but like it's kind of a fun piece to do as a separate thing or as part of the march. Have been some other cool ideas.
oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm gonna make sure I write these down and share them in the follow-up. I love that. Any other ideas? Mayan's saying yes, noisemakers. Totally right. Like you have permission to be as loud as you want. Like, that's always fun for kids. Johanna.
One thing that I do sometimes with my partner is we'll host a like kids meetup picnic in the park before the action and then go together to the action because it can sometimes be so overwhelming when there's like a huge crowd, and it's so good to have your like kid and parent buddies with you already. So meeting up somewhere super kid friendly, like a close by park, letting the kids run around, eat some pizza, blow some bubbles, do some chalk, whatever, and then kind of en masse moving into the bigger action. Yeah, even building some art too. It's awesome. Um, can be, yeah, a nice trick.
Oh, that's a great one. Becky?
So I know in terms of family friendly stuff, we often think of children, but I'm thinking of grandparents, and I'm wondering if you have thoughts about accessibility. We are Seniors for Climate Action now as a seniors group, and we're starting to think about how can we make it easier for we're planning in Edmonton a march and a rally, and so we are interested in ideas if anybody has some of those ideas.
Thanks, Becky. That's really important. I'd say it's definitely not my forte, but some things I've heard of are if you're planning a march to keep in mind the incline that you'll be walking on to make sure that it's not, too steep of a grade. Also, if yeah, to like sort of scan the sidewalks for are there curbs what's the word? Like, does the curb connect to the road? So for in terms of wheelchair accessibility or ease of movement, um, Jerry. Oh, Jerry, you're on mute. I don't know if you wanted to.
Sorry. The only thing that I've been thinking about since Tylene kind of put this on our plate is I think that, and you can use it in conjunction with these art things, I think it would be really interesting to have some people, some of the younger seniors possibly, um, just come up with some angel like wings and maybe a halo, and then we're probably going to have our t-shirts on as well, scan whatever. But if we can get people to do that at the art thing, and then we're easily identifiable, we can help people with, walkers maybe, or wheelchairs, or if, people are on a cane. I think that that's just kind of one of the things that I thought about.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, kind of like marshals, but specifically
Mhm.
with sort of even more specific roles in mind. I see Johanna wrote proximity to subway stations, accessible public transit, bringing camping or folding chairs, so people have a place to sit if they're listening to speeches or hanging out one space for a while, and also a wagon with water in the heat. Yeah, water is definitely a big one. Um, I always think of excessive, like how close bathrooms are as well. I mean, that's me for with my parent hat on, but I mean, we all need ease of access to bathrooms, like there's public washrooms nearby. Um, Any other thoughts around that about making spaces more accessible, whether that's, for people of all ages? Jerry, I'm not sure if your hand is up for this one or was for the last one. Okay.
Yeah. Well, one of the things you want to be, we're going to be careful about is to make sure that there is some place for elderly people to sit
Yeah.
during the talks, providing maybe 10 or 20 folding chairs. Uh, and and the other thing is we're thinking of calling our parade, which we're having just for a couple of blocks, uh, uh, a walk and roll.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
Hmm.
Yeah, length, right? Also, just like you said,
Yeah,
just a couple of blocks, like the length of the march.
yeah.
Thinking about that with planning. Yeah. Just gonna check the chat. Yeah, Liz says list time frames and try to stick to them. For people with low energy, maybe they can only do the march or the rally. Yeah, it's a good point. Like being really clear and as detailed as possible in the communications and the promotion about what people can expect, so they're prepared and they can plan accordingly. I really appreciate that being brought up. Okay. Well, were there any other thoughts anyone wanted to share on that topic, how to make actions family friendly? Any questions about accessing the For Our Kids funding? What could qualify for that?
I've been at marches not with kids, but like where there's been like puppets,
Ooh.
like and I think kids would love that. I've never been uh planned ahead enough to be able to part of, but I think that's a really cool thing to and they're really cool when they're in a march too, even if
Like the
it's just
big puppets, like
yeah,
yeah.
like the big where they have like arms and like there's a paper mache head and then there's hands, right? Um or maybe it's not hands, maybe it could be a giant windmill, like that could people could be turning, that could be all sorts of cool things that you could do. Um uh yeah, anyways, just throwing it out there in case people are inspired because it's
Love
kind
it.
of cool.
Yeah, thanks so much. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a little recap. Um, of the calls to action from this call. So we've invited you to RSVP to an action near you, and there on the screen is the website. I think most folks have already done that. If this applies to you, inviting you to get involved as a family in your local action, and that can look all kinds of ways. It could be as involved as, initiating the organization of a family-friendly zone at the action, or it could be more like, coming together with a few friends to host an art build, and then make a plan to get together on the day of and go together. Or it could include hosting a letter writing party to MPs about Draw the Line. We really want them to know that people care about this. And I think it actually is really powerful to send a physical letter and say, I wasn't able to be there at that march that day, but I want you to know that those people marching have my full support, and the messages of that action I'm totally behind. And then a reminder that you can apply for funding from 4Kids to cover the cost of helping make the Draw the Line actions more family friendly. And we will send you all the relevant links. Just checking. Yes, and then I'm seeing that Peggy has mentioned stilt walkers are great for media attention. Absolutely. And Johanna mentions the email you can use to connect with the local organizers of an action near you. So that's drawthelinecanada@gmail.com. It's in the chat, and we will send it in the follow-up email.